Hello, Mr. Brynjolfsson. Very nice to meet you. Welcome in Brussels.
My pleasure. It's always good to be here.
We're here to talk about your book that came out a couple of months ago. It's a really great book. I can recommend it to everyone. When I wrote a review about it, I said that every politician should read it or not be elected. So
well, thank you.
There's a lot of things of how we feel about your book. And criticism, praise has been enormous, overwhelming, and rightfully so. And one of the things I personally really like about your book is the fact that there seems to be some kind of amazement underpinning it at the basis, at the very basis of the book. So here you have this MIT professor who's at the front row of technological change and evolution,
right?
And who seems to be amazed after all.
Yes.
When did that happen, and how did that happen?
Well, I do my best to try to keep up with technology, but I think every human has the same weakness, which is our brains are wired for a linear world, and we're used to seeing things progress step by step. If you take 5 steps to the left, you get 5 steps further. But the recent technologies are exponential, which means that they double and redouble each time. So 5 doublings is 32 times more powerful, and 10 doublings is over 1,000 times more powerful. So when you look at the way the technology is affecting specific capabilities, whether it's driving a car or diagnosing disease or understanding language, the ability of the technology to do things we never could have conceived of before is happening faster and faster.
Mm-hmm. In your book, at the very first pages, you give the example of the Google car. It's something you thought your students wouldn't happen in the foreseeable future only like 10 years ago.
Right.
And then 2 years ago you were driving one, so to say.
Right.
What was it like to drive?
Well, yeah, the self-driving car is a great example of how technology caught me off guard, and it's good. One of the fun parts of writing a book like this is you get to spend some time working with the technologists and experiencing them. When we got in that self-driving car, I have to be frank that one of my first feelings was fear. Mm-hmm. There was no driver, and we were going down Route 101, and the car in front of us came to a complete dead stop in the middle of the afternoon. There's a lot of traffic, and I had to grip the seat a little more tightly, hoping that my driverless car would recognize that there was a stopped car in the middle of the highway in front of us. Of course it did, and that's why I'm here to do this interview with you today. And so we survived that. And my next feeling as it was going along is I got more comfortable with it, but I guess there was a feeling of exhilaration. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's a little embarrassing to say this, but Andy and I would be like waving out the window and saying, "Hey guys, look at me, we're driving in a self-driving car, or riding in a self-driving car." And that lasted maybe another 10 or 15 minutes. But we went all the way from Mountain View up to San Francisco and back again. It's probably like a 2-hour drive. And most of that ride, I think the main feeling was probably more like boredom. Mm-hmm. The car drives very smoothly, 55 miles per hour. It doesn't slalom around the other cars. It just stays straight. And after a while, it's like, okay, I get this. There's really nothing special. And it's a little bit like watching a toaster work, mm-hmm. or a dishwasher. Maybe at first it's surprising.
Very smart dishwasher.
Very smart. But after a while, you're like, okay, I understand it, and I don't have to pay attention to this anymore. I can do other things. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's a microcosm for how many other of these technologies will affect us. At first, fear and amazement, but after a while, it'll be part of our everyday lives.
Mm-hmm. That's what you write in your book as well, that the good thing about this technological evolution that has been there since the 1800s is that it didn't come like overnight. We didn't get this like whole new world overnight that we had to adapt to, because probably we wouldn't be able to adapt to that, I imagine, if we would have.
Right. I mean, technology's always been changing the world. Technology's always been destroying jobs. It's always been creating jobs. But what's different today is the pace is much, much more rapid. Mm-hmm. It took about 80 years for the steam engine to double in efficiency. Moore's law is a doubling in power every 18 to 24 months. Mm-hmm. So we're in a whole different scale of speed. And as we say in the book, it's not just the exponential improvements, the rapid exponential improvements. We're also in a digital world, which is fundamentally different than a world of atoms. Mm-hmm. Digital products can be copied at almost zero cost, and each copy is perfect, and each copy can be transmitted anywhere instantaneously. Free, perfect, and instant are characteristics of digital goods, but you don't hear those adjectives for most other goods and services. And last but not least, in the book we talk about the combinatorial nature of innovation, the ability to combine and recombine innovations to create more value than ever before. The Google self-driving car we talked about before is actually a combination of many innovations. Some old ones like the internal combustion engine, some new ones like LiDAR and vision systems, and of course computer power, big data algorithms. You put these different components together and you get a self-driving car.
So what we're seeing now is just, we're at the beginning of something, if I understand you well. It's not going to stop, we're not at the height of something, we're warming up for something bigger.
We are just at the early stages of what Andrew McAfee and I call the second machine age. And these amazing improvements, whether in self-driving cars or machines that you can speak to and they understand you, or that can diagnose diseases and solve other problems, these are not the crowning achievements of the second machine age. These are just the warm-up acts, the early stages of even bigger changes that we foresee in the next 10, 20, and 30 years. What they have in common is that they are transforming our ability to augment our brains, our cognitive tasks. In the first machine age, in the Industrial Revolution, it was mostly augmenting muscle power, like with the steam engine and the internal combustion engine. But the transformation of machines to be able to do mental tasks, we think, is at least as big a revolution as the first machine age that affected muscle tasks.
Absolutely, and not only they're enabling us to augment our mental abilities, they're becoming smart themselves as well. When you say borderline intelligent even.
Right.
Would you think that that's something that we should be, well, not only aware of, but also a little afraid of? There was this op-ed piece from Stephen Hawking this week in The Independent who said, like, we're not sufficiently thinking about what this could possibly mean in the years and the decades to come. Would you agree?
I do share some of his concerns. Right now, the most immediate concerns that we talk about in the book around the economic dislocation, both the enormous wealth being created, which I think is a good thing, but also the rearrangement of income. But if you go further into the future, some of the issues that Stephen Hawking brought up and my colleague at MIT, Max Tegmark, and others point to the possibility that these machines, as they become more and more intelligent, will become harder for us to understand and ultimately control. And that leaves the potential for some catastrophic risks and failures. We will become more dependent on these machines inevitably to run our electrical systems, our financial systems, really in some sense our life support systems. And if we don't understand how they're making decisions, there's the possibility that something will go very wrong. They also can self-replicate. When you take a piece of software, you can teach it to make other copies. And in many cases, that would be a useful thing for robots and software bots to be able to make additional copies so that you can multiply your economic efficiency. But as they replicate, that also leaves the potential for them to go out of control in some unforeseen way, just like, say, viruses and microbes go out of control sometimes today. Those are some potential risks that we should start paying more attention to as they become more salient over the coming years and decades.
In your book, and that's another great thing about your book, you're being both really optimistic about this bounty, as you call it, that technology is creating, this added value to our wealth. So you're both optimistic, but also very realistic. And one of the things you write about, one of the risks, is the risk of people losing this race against machines and even ever smarter machines. What can we do? I mean, we're individuals living in the 21st century. We're seeing these things happen. What can we as individuals do to prevent us from losing this race against ever smarter machines?
Well, that's a complicated question that requires a long answer. But let me just first agree with the premise that the technology is creating enormous wealth. We call it bounty, and that's good news. But it's also causing a lot of dislocation, disruption, because there's no economic law that says that everyone's going to benefit from these new technologies. Some people can be made worse off. Even a majority of people can potentially be made worse off. And over the past 10, 15, 20 years, the median income in the United States and many other countries has actually fallen, even though the overall size of the pie has gotten bigger. The person at the 50th percentile has gotten worse. We need to rethink our organizations and institutions to address these changes. The problem ultimately is not with the technology that's creating this value, it's with our slowness in adapting to it. Mm-hmm. The existing organizations, our existing skills aren't keeping up with the technology. So as old jobs get automated away, people need to identify new industries they can work in and new skills that they can contribute. Just as we did in the 1800s and the early 1900s, we're not doing that fast enough. In the book, we lay out a broad set of recommendations. I won't go into all the details, but they include changes in education, reinventing it to boost creativity and interpersonal skills and using technology to help with that. Secondly, changes in boosting entrepreneurship, so there'll be more people working on inventing those new goods and services and jobs that we need for the future. And thirdly, ways of reinventing our tax code to lead to a more equitable share of this growing pie. Right now, more and more of it is going to a small group of people, and the broader set of society hasn't benefited as much. We can do things to encourage job creation and broader sharing of income through things like the Earned Income Tax Credit. If we do those three things, transforming education, boosting entrepreneurship, and rethinking our tax code, we can go a long way towards creating a society where we have bounty without the damaging side effects.
Mm-hmm. So actually your book is really good news.
You know, I wouldn't say it's really good news. I wouldn't say it's bad news. The phrase I've started using is mindful optimist. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is that not that we inevitably are going to be in a good world where everything works out okay, but that we have the potential to do that. Mm-hmm. If we are mindful, if we are careful about our choices. Mm-hmm. Technology today is more powerful than it's ever been before. It's a tool, and that means that we have more capability of changing the world than we ever did before. Now we can harness that technology and use mm-hmm. that tool to make the world better, to shape it in accordance with our values, to create shared prosperity. And if we do that, I would be optimistic. But there's no guarantee that we will make those kinds of changes. And if we just sit back and watch the technology unfold without being active as individuals, as organizations, as societies, then I think we could easily end up in a dystopian future. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think it's important that people think about these challenges today and decide how they want to respond, what their values are. And that's what I mean by mindful optimism.
Mm-hmm. What we have it in our own hands, it's in our hands.
It's absolutely in our hands. I disagree with the technological utopians who think that technology would solve all our problems. I disagree with the technological dystopians who think that we are doomed and the technology will destroy us. Mm-hmm. They both make essentially the same mistake, which is they think that technology is going to do something to us. It's just the other way around. We can use technology, and we should use technology, but that will only happen if we start by diagnosing what the problems, the challenges, and the opportunities are ahead of us. Once we do that, I think we'll be in good shape to use the technology to make the world better.
Thank you very much for this interview and for your time.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you.